Welcome to the Think Report. This is a new channel where we take a look at our culture, our media, point out some of the flaws, and offer a clear way to look at it through logic and reason. My name is Chris, and today we're going to look at how our culture views transgender. In the US, organizations like transhealthcare.org trivialize gender dysphoria with things like find a gender surgeon by state, as if you were shopping for Uber Eats. In Canada, a ruling by a BC court is hailed a victory for trans youth by overriding their father's decision not to allow the 14-year-old to take hormone pills. The US and Canada have become so obsessed with accommodating differences in people that we're now skipping scientific, legal, and cultural due diligence and ignoring very important questions like, are we sure children should be allowed to surgically transition? Should we do more research before accepting surgical transitioning? And are we sure that plastic surgery is the best solution to a problem that lives in the brain? Let's take a look. Should children be allowed to transition? In Canada and the US, children as young as 13 are making the decision that they're the wrong gender, and in many cases, parental authority is being overridden. In fact, in some states like Maryland, the school board is not only not required to tell the parents about the child's gender dysphoria, but prohibited from informing the parents about the child's plan to transition. By not requiring, or in some cases, as in Maryland and BC, prohibiting parental involvement altogether, we're placing the onus of responsibility for medical gender transition on the shoulders of our children. There are obvious problems with this, but it also creates inconsistencies in the way that we treat children. We've decided that people under the age of 16 are considered children, and as a result, they can't drive, they can't purchase alcohol, they can't purchase cannabis, they can't own a gun, they can't vote, they can't get married, they can't run away from home. And in both Canada and the US, we've given them their own laws, the Criminal Youth Act, because they don't have the same decision-making soundness that a grown adult would have. So we cut them a little slack. But when it comes to chemical, or in some cases physical gender transition, we allow them to make that decision. These decisions are not reversible. So, should we do more research? The answer is always yes. In fact, when you think you've done enough research, things change and you need to redo your research. But more importantly, do we have enough research to be confident that we're making the right decisions by amputating bodies to align with gender dysphoria? According to our Cornell website, there are 55 studies that investigate various relationships between gender dysphoria, transitioning to a different gender, and quality of life. This website claims that there is a robust international consensus in the peer-reviewed literature that gender transition, including medical treatments such as hormone therapy and surgeries, improves the overall well-being of transgender individuals. So, I read a couple, and their claims seem not false, but not true either. Which, as a side note, pulls into question maybe all the research that Cornell does, but that's probably another day. In a decent study, you'd expect 2,000 participants. In a really good study, you'd have thousands and thousands of participants. Obviously, the more participants you have, the more accurate your research will be. So in the first study I read, there were 247 participants. Not a lot. In the second, there were 889. So moving in the right direction. And then the third had 22. 22. The danger in making a conclusion from such a small sample size is that in no way have you covered all the varieties of transgender situations or transgender people with a sample size of 22 people. That's like saying my 14-year-old is 5 foot 7 inches, and therefore all 14-year-olds must be 5 foot 7 inches. Inferring such a small sample size is representative of the entire population is lazy. I'm not saying that the conclusion is wrong. It might actually be correct. What I'm saying is that you can't make a conclusion with such a small sample size. In addition, since we don't have the research, we can't assume that our conclusions about hormone therapy and surgeries improving the overall well-being of transgender individuals is true. For example, recently it was discovered that the so-called chemical imbalance that antidepressants were claiming to solve doesn't actually exist. There is no chemical imbalance. Drug companies were peddling that their serotonin and dopamine activating drugs were correcting the chemical imbalance when that simply just wasn't true. We hadn't done the research. So how do we know we aren't doing the same thing with transgender surgery and hormone treatment? We don't. When someone decides to transition, we're bullied into accepting this and harassed if we want proof. In 2021, the singer Demi Lovato came out as non-binary. Then in 2022 claimed, "Recently I've been feeling more feminine, so I've adopted she/her again." That should be a huge red flag to anyone who's considering something more permanent than a pronoun change. There's always room for more research, and right now we don't seem to have the minimum requirement to satisfy the massive risks we're leaving our vulnerable populations with. Finally, is surgery and hormone therapy the right treatment for a condition that lives in the brain? According to goodtherapy.org, dysphoria is a psychological state that is often caused by or accompanies mental health condition. So if it's a mental health condition, does it seem strange that we're treating this problem with plastic surgery? Another example of when we treated medical disorders with physical surgeries is the lobotomy, where tens of thousands of patients were lobotomized in the 1900s in Canada and the US for mental disorders like schizophrenia. These are called psychosurgeries, which aren't very common today with the advancement of medicine. Gender reassignment surgery isn't considered a psychosurgery because it isn't an operation performed on the brain to change behavior. Instead, we accept the individual's gender dysphoria and resort to amputating bodies or blocking hormones to align the individual's body with their mental dysphoria. If we apply this method of thinking to an illness like schizophrenia, it would be like if a schizophrenic person said to you, "Batman's on the phone and he wants me to kill the bad guy." But instead of saying, "No, Batman's not on the phone," we're handing the individual the gun. Again, the problem is not only are we missing the research required to guide the answer, we can't even ask the research questions in fear of someone canceling our brightest minds for conducting the research in the first place. I'm not saying that gender dysphoria is good, bad, normal, not normal, similar to schizophrenia, or completely different. I'm saying we have nowhere near the level of research required to prevent a parent from participating in their child's transition. I can't make a better decision on this than anyone else with the current research, but what I can say is that we shouldn't be amputating children without it. Right now, it sounds like the trans community is telling doctors what the condition and the treatment is. What they should be asking for is the research. Think about that.